All right, today we're diving into one of the most important struggles of the 20th century, the fight against apartheid in South Africa. And we're going to explore the incredibly complex legacy of its most iconic leader, Nelson Mandela. Wow, just let that sink in for a second. Our country is truly a prison house. An activist, Dora Tamanana, said that back in 1955, and it just cuts right to the bone of what it was like to live under apartheid. You see, it wasn't just a bunch of unfair laws. It was a system designed to lock people down, not just their bodies, but their spirits too. To really get what this struggle was all about, we have to start there, inside that prison house.
So, to really grasp the scale of this fight, we've got to start with the system itself. What exactly was apartheid?
The word itself, apartheid, it's Afrikaans for apartness. And honestly, that's the simplest way to put it. When the National Party took power in 1948, they created this legal framework for total racial domination, controlling every single part of a person's life, all based on the color of their skin.
And when I say every part of life, I mean every part. It wasn't just about who could vote or where you could own land. No. It was the small, everyday things that were designed to humiliate. Things like park benches, buses, schools, hospitals, you name it. Every single space was divided, constantly hammering home this brutal racial hierarchy. And you have to understand, this wasn't just some unspoken social rule. Oh no, this was all written down, enforced by this tangled web of cruel laws. Laws that told you where you could live, who you were allowed to love and marry, and even where you could walk. It basically turned most of the population into criminals in their own homeland. And get this number, it's staggering. Under apartheid, 87% of all the land in South Africa was reserved for the white minority. A minority, by the way, that made up less than 15% of the population. This was way beyond segregation. This was mass theft on a national scale. And the human cost of all this? It was absolutely devastating. This system shoved millions of Black South Africans into these impoverished, overcrowded areas they called homelands. Families were just ripped apart. Men would have to go work in the cities, living in townships on the outskirts, while their families were stuck behind. But here's the thing about oppression, right? It always sparks resistance. So let's turn to the people who looked at this reality and said, no, not anymore. This is where the long walk to freedom really begins. Now, this resistance, it didn't start with guns and bombs. It started with people. All through the 1950s, groups like the African National Congress, the ANC, they led these huge campaigns of nonviolent civil disobedience. We're talking boycotts, strikes, protests, anything to grind the system to a halt. But then, everything changed. You can see the shift right here. In 1955, there was still hope. The Freedom Charter laid out this beautiful vision for a democratic future. And then, 1960, Sharpeville. Police just opened fire on peaceful, unarmed protesters, killing 69 people. The government's response? Ban the ANC, declare a state of emergency. Faced with that kind of violence, the ANC decided peaceful protest just wasn't going to cut it anymore. By 1961, they had an armed wing. The fight had changed forever. And right at the heart of this transformation was one man. A man whose story would become the symbol of this entire struggle for the whole world. You know his name, of course, Nelson Mandela. He started out as a young lawyer, an activist who was all in with the ANC. He even co-founded its youth league, which was pushing for more radical action. He was a key leader from early on, and he dedicated his entire life to bringing this system down. And the price he paid for that commitment is, well, it's hard to even wrap your head around it. 27 years. For almost 3 decades, the leader of this global movement was locked away in a prison cell, most of that time on the infamous Robben Island. Just look at these two photos side by side. I mean, what a journey. On the left, you've got the young revolutionary. Fun fact, his Xhosa name, Rolihlahla, literally means troublemaker. And on the right, the statesman, the first president of a free and democratic South Africa. This isn't just one man's story. It's the story of an entire nation's transformation. So the big question is, how did that happen? How does a system that seemed so powerful, so permanent, just crumble? Well, it wasn't just one thing. It was this perfect storm, really. Inside the country, massive, unstoppable protests made it impossible to govern. And from the outside, the world was putting on the pressure: boycotts, sanctions, total isolation. All that pressure finally forced President F.W. de Klerk to do the unthinkable. In 1990, he freed Nelson Mandela. He unbanned the ANC, and the long, messy, difficult talks began, leading to that incredible moment in 1994, South Africa's first truly democratic election. But look, winning that election, that wasn't the finish line. In a lot of ways, it was just the starting line for building a brand new country. And to really get at Mandela's legacy, we have to look at his vision for the future. A huge part of that vision was education. You've probably heard this quote before. It's one of his most famous, and it tells you everything you need to know about his philosophy. For Mandela, education wasn't just about cramming facts into your head. No, it was the single most powerful tool you could use to rebuild a nation and transform a society. So Mandela's vision here was basically twofold. He saw education as having two massive jobs to do, both equally important. On the one hand, it was a tool for social justice, to heal the wounds of apartheid and build a real democracy. But on the other hand, it was an engine for economic growth, to give people the skills they needed to build a country that actually worked for everyone.
But here's where it gets really interesting. What happened to that vision after he left office? Well, some analysis of official education reports reveals a pretty telling trend. Take a look at how often the word democracy shows up. Back in the mid-90s, when Mandela was president, it was everywhere. It was central to the whole conversation. But over the next couple of decades, its use just plummeted. So, as the word democracy was fading out, what was taking its place? Well, take a look at this. Words like capital, as in human capital, and assess, as in standardized testing, they shot way up. The message seems pretty clear, right? The language of education policy slowly shifted away from those big ideas of social justice and more towards economic, market-driven goals. Which brings us to the final and I think most critical question. Mandela believed education had to do two things at once: build a just society and build a strong economy. But in the years since he left power, has the focus on economic growth started to overshadow that original dream of social justice? It's a huge question, and it goes right to the very heart of what his legacy really means for South Africa's future.